Well, going back to the military-industrial complex, let's name it properly. High-tech industry, advanced industry. The expenditures for the Afghan war, trillions of dollars, break it down. Not much of it went to Afghanistan. Most of it stays in the country to those who are benefiting from it. So, is it a failure? Well, depends where you look. With regard to the Iraq, I think there's a big difference between Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. The Afghanistan war was a real, from an imperial point of view, a real error from the start. Both wars, I should say, are criminal wars, and Britain is deeply implicated in the criminality, particularly under Blair. But they were both criminal enterprises, but different. Simply from the point of view of imperial strategy, the invasion of Iraq made good sense. Iraq is one of the world's major oil producers, very cheap oil. Stick a hole in the ground, oil gushes out. You don't have to do deep drilling. It's right in the middle of the main energy sector of the world, Middle East oil. So taking over Iraq from an imperial point of view made quite good sense. And it was openly stated at the time, openly advertised, that this was the first step. They were just going on to, there were another 7 countries in the headlights to go after. So that's standard imperial policy, perfectly sensible. Didn't work out. They caused an utter catastrophe, almost went through it all over the region, devastation. Didn't harm the United States. It's devastating for the region, but they didn't achieve the imperial goals. They were in fact stated clearly by the end. By 2007, when it was clear that the Iraq invasion was failing, this was then still the Bush administration, George W. Bush, November 2007, came out with what's called a SOFA agreement, Status of Forces agreement, with the government of Iraq. The proposal was that the United States should have permanent military bases in Iraq, and that U.S. corporations, meaning energy corporations, should have preferential access to the Iraqi market. This was taken so seriously that a couple months later, when the budget was passed, Bush added what are called signing statements, saying these are the provisions of the budget that I'm not going to pay attention to. And it included all the ones I mentioned. Well, the U.S. imposed government of Iraq refused to accept it. But those were the imperial goals. Perfectly understandable, not achieved, but it's common in the history of imperialism. Now, what about Afghanistan? No purpose whatsoever. No strategic purpose, no interest in Afghanistan, no interest in Al-Qaeda. That was made perfectly clear. The Taliban offered to surrender shortly after the U.S. invaded. The attitude of the U.S. government was explicit. We do not negotiate surrenders. That would, of course, turn over bin Laden, Taliban. We're not interested. We don't negotiate surrenders. What are we? That was actually described very well by the leading anti-Taliban Afghan resistance leader, Abdul Haq, highly revered in Afghanistan. He was interviewed in The Guardian, in fact, shortly after the U.S. invasion by Anatol Yevin, a distinguished Central Asian scholar, who asked Al-Haq, why do you think the Americans invaded? It's about 2 weeks after the invasion. He said, they're going to kill a lot of Afghans. They're going to undermine our quite promising efforts to overthrow the Taliban from within. But they don't care. They want to show their muscle and intimidate everyone. It's about right. It's pretty much what Donald Rumsfeld said shortly after. We don't negotiate surrenders. We want to show our muscle and intimidate everyone. That makes perfect sense from the point of view of the mafia, which is basically international society. You don't. You gotta intimidate everyone and show your muscle. We see it happening right now. It goes way back to the British, to the French, far back as you go.